introductory session yesterday that was moderated largely by Perspectives Climate Group and facilitated by the government of Tanzania and by the Global Carbon Markets Program of the GIZ. As a collective, we welcome you to today. Yesterday, we focused, we started the day with a very good introduction coming through from Perspectives Climate Group, focusing on the basics of what corresponding adjustments are, as an accounting tool, how the corresponding adjustments do or will be playing a very strong role in building carbon market integrity, especially through Article 6 systems and facilitating NDC accounting as well. Our hosts, our moderators, took us through the mechanics, the details of how corresponding adjustments take place, focusing on very highly technical procedural arrangements. I would encourage, because we will share the recordings and the slides from this training. I would encourage us all to have a look at them and to follow through. Credit to Perspectives for very well laid out day one. We did have a focus on double counting. Double counting is one of the major issues around integrity of carbon markets, in terms of the use of credits to offset emissions from country inventories, in terms of issuance from different registry systems, and also claiming of credits as well. These are practices that were quite common and largely often relied on the integrity and on the procedures of the project developers themselves. Some would actually follow the principles of integrity, but we didn't really have any strong procedures to hold them back. Corresponding adjustments now are a very strong procedure run by governments, and which will contribute to a very transparent and high integrity carbon market. As we discuss the process, with emphasis on especially the responsibility of those who are developing projects to carry out corresponding adjustments, especially from the point of the first transfers. We also went into what it means for country registries, adding, at the point of the transfers, when corresponding adjustment is made, and this was actually highlighted and has been highlighted quite often. At the point of the first corresponding adjustments, this is actually added back to the registry of the party that's doing the transfer and subtracted from the party that is implementing or that is receiving the credits. This should be taken note of, because it does contribute to our NDC accounting processes. Also, very strong highlight: as long as you're doing ITMOs, you will need to carry out corresponding adjustments. As we built into the discussion yesterday, Tanzania did explain to us how the process, how they are.
Hello, are we starting? Anybody there?
Yes, we are inside. And please mute your microphone. So as we did proceed with the discussion, Tanzania did tell us how they are currently in the process of establishing their systems based on country priorities to actually carry out corresponding adjustments as part of their NDC accounting. We had Deo Shirima, who was the We had Deo Shirima, who was from the National Carbon Monitoring Center, who are responsible for the development of carbon markets in Tanzania. Further to that, as we went through our question and answer session, we did have a very strong interest in how cancellations would affect, project development in the long term. And now that we're talking about today, as we enter into our discussion, we are going to emphasize the systems, the structures, and the responsibilities of stakeholders in the implementation of NDC carbon accounting. And with that, I would like to hand over to Stefan to run the first session of the day. Thank you very much, Stefan. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Shivan, for the introduction. Thanks, Paris, also for sharing the slides. I would say let's go again to the agenda first, that we give you an overview of what we are planning to do today. Good. So we have already completed the recap of day one and the framing. Thank you, Andrew. And what I will do now is to provide a slightly more detailed walkthrough through the corresponding adjustment process that also touches a little bit more on these reporting requirements under the Enhanced Transparency Framework, ETF, that we have discussed. There will only be one more detailed presentation input, so less slides than yesterday, although I cannot guarantee they will be less abstract and technical. But we have two panel discussions this time. First, as has already been indicated, with Mbaye Diane from the UNFCCC supervisory body, and also methodology expert panel, one of the distinguished experts in this field, who with a very good grasp of the current state at level of UNFCCC, and of course also for a long time the AGN lead negotiator in Article 6. And also we have David Heinz from the Gold Standard, who will also provide the perspective of an independent crediting program. Afterwards, we'll have a second panel, which will now bring in more the market perspective. And we have Irene Chikwoti from the government of Uganda, who will share her perspective. And we'll also have Urban Spaniviara, who is representing more broadly the buyer perspective. Yeah, so that's it for today. And without further ado, I would like to go now into the presentation. Next slide. So this is now an introductory overview again, and it touches on some of the things we've discussed yesterday. So when we start on the left-hand side with the preparatory activities, you recall our elaborations on the NDC features and target types, conditional, unconditional, etc., multi-year, single year. That is exactly what we mean here as well. So that's step one. And let's also recall again, and I keep saying this over and over and over, but one cannot say it often enough, carbon markets are an instrument that are designed to help achieve NDCs. They're not an objective in itself. So that's why this is also here the starting point. Then it is within, the prerogative of the country to decide on criteria and conditions which they would like to use for authorizing IPMOs. Paris has elaborated nicely on that, and if you weren't with us yesterday, I would invite you to revisit the slides for this. I have very lightly touched now on yesterday on various accounting approaches as a basis for NDC accounting and corresponding adjustments. And here now we'll start to dive more deeply today into these subject matters. And that is then the basis for the calculating the annual emissions balance with the national inventory as a basis, but with the subtractions or additions through the corresponding adjustment. And then we'll get to the reporting requirements. There's the initial report that has to specify the accounting accounting approach we have been discussing, but also has additional information. And we cannot go into too much detail now here, but additional information on the type of mechanisms involved, the actors involved, etc., etc. And then in the future, there will be both annual and regular information, which basically is the frequent update of quantities of ITMOs transferred and then adjusted accordingly. So this is how the overall sequence looks like. And now we go into more detail. Next slide, please. The accounting methods. So again, we have the two types of NDC targets, single year NDC target and multi-year NDC targets. The main difference being that the single year target only specifies the target year, the goals, so to speak, usually 2030 in the NDC 2.0 and now either 2035 or 2040 in the NDC 3.0 NDC generations. And many countries have chosen single year targets. So that's mainly what we're looking at here. But of course, it is also useful to understand that many countries also have multi-year targets. So the corresponding adjustment method can be for single year targets that one develops as a host country an indicative multi-year emission trajectory or budget that is consistent with NDC implementation. So what does that mean? Essentially, the NDC emission pathways and also the mitigation pathway is being modeled. And there is a quantity of ITMOs on an annual basis, sorry, not of ITMOs, of greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis that then is categorized into the unconditional and conditional target if the country has chosen to do so. But usually this is only given, the target year is only given in the single year, 2030 often. So basically the idea is to annualize the emission quantities based on the trajectory that is aligned with the modeling, more or less. The alternative method is the averaging method, would be to calculate the average annual amount of ITMOs first transferred or used over the NDC period, so that the cumulative number of ITMOs is then divided by the number of years. So quite a different approach. And what this means then in terms of corresponding adjustments, amounts and timing. So for the first trajectory method, one would annually apply the corresponding adjustments for the total amount of ITMOs first transferred for each year. And then for the averaging method, one would apply the average of ITMOs that are transferred each year and also apply then only this averaged amount in the final target year. This may sound a little bit strange, and you could ask why. So the reason is for these accounting methods, to put it now in a very simple way, is that if there is a single year target, in theory, one could have the brilliant idea to, more or less have a less ambitious mitigation approach in the years leading up to, let's say, 2030. And then for the single target year, buy a bunch of ITMOs that can be then accounted for as mitigation, and therefore let's say, instead of having 100 million tons of CO2 equivalent in the inventory, buying 50 million ITMOs, and then one could claim formally that in the year 2030, only 50 years of CO2 equivalent have to report to UNFCCC. This now, of course, sounds very crude, what I'm saying, but just to illustrate that there are concerns about an accounting integrity that has led to the thinking and specification of these accounting methods. As I said, they are different, and one can discuss the pros and cons of what is more attractive from a host country perspective. I don't think there's a clear answer. I think there's more effort needed to really look into that. And since countries will have to specify the accounting method at the beginning of each NDC period, it's quite important to really start thinking about that from a host country perspective. Many countries already will have done that, but Some are very much focused on authorization, but now these accounting methods discussions, in our observation, have received less attention so far. So it's quite important to start thinking about that and prepare for that. Okay, well, you've already seen exactly what I said here in orange. Yeah, and then the NDC period would mean now typically until 2030, but it is commonly understood then later on to describe the 5-year periods that that is at the heart of the Paris Agreement ratchet mechanism, where NDCs will be updated every 5 years, and then both crediting periods but also ITMO accounting methods are all aligned to this 5-year cycle. Next slide, please. Good. Timing of corresponding adjustments. Again, we have here the host country and the buyer country. You recall our discussion on the various types of double counting and how important it is to prevent that as a key objective for Article 6.2. So the host country shall apply, so that is a must, shall apply corresponding adjustments to ITMOs when they have been both authorized and first transfer. So this first transfer is really a critical step in the overall life cycle of a carbon credit, because that triggers the corresponding adjustment on the host country side. And it does not matter for which of the different use cases. Now, for the buyer country perspective, it depends on the use case. So first of all, the buyer country can also authorize, the carbon credits to become ITMOs, but that is optional. So most likely we'll not see much of that. But when the credit is being purchased, which then triggers the transfer, then it becomes very important whether the carbon credit will be used for the NDC of the buyer country, which then would trigger a corresponding adjustment, as you see in the blue bar here on the right-hand side, or if it's used for other international mitigation purposes that are outside of the scope of the NDC. We gave the example of CORSIA yesterday, the International Aviation Mechanism. Similar efforts are underway, but at an earlier stage for shipping, etc. So then the buyer country does not need to make a corresponding adjustment if, for instance, the airline in a country is purchasing the credit for CORSIA participation. It does not require a corresponding adjustment on the buyer side. Why? Because it has always been outside of the scope of the NDC. Next slide. Now here we see the same picture again, similar situation. So again, the first transfer triggers the corresponding adjustments. The situation we're looking at here is if it's a non-state buyer. And here one could imagine, of course, also that there is, a voluntary use of the carbon credit, not against any particular purpose. But if a non-state buyer, such as an airline, would buy the carbon credit and then use it again for OIMP, for other international mitigation purposes, such as CORSIA, then also the host country would need to provide the corresponding adjustment. So that's more or less a very similar situation, just leaving out the buyer country perspective. Next slide. Good. Now we are moving a bit towards the reporting requirements. I know this is a lot. I'll not try to walk you through this in much detail. This is primarily something that host countries have to worry about. And most of this is required in any circumstance for reporting under the biannual transparency framework, for the enhanced transparency framework, and then the related biannual transparency report. So it's not something that only has to be done for Article 6. That's what I want to convey quite clearly, because the main purpose, again, is reporting against progress towards achieving the NDC targets. So you can see on the upper left-hand side, Article 6 reporting, and you can see that there are various reports. There is the National Inventory Report. That is strictly what's in the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And then we also have the biannual transparency report, and that then also includes additional information, such as the one on ITMO transfers and corresponding adjustments. So that is the main difference now between an inventory and a transparency report. And again, there are various individual reporting elements required. I've mentioned those already on an earlier slide, so I'll go quite quickly over it here again. The initial report is what few countries have so far submitted, but it's an essential element of Article 6.2 participation requirements. So as you can see, the information on the accounting method, what I described earlier, trajectory versus averaging, description of the cooperative approach, so which mechanism, and similar related information. Then the annual information is really the quantity of ITMOs, where do they come from, etc. And the regular information then is the annual information report on the emissions balance. That is more or less the inventory emissions plus minus transfers, oversimplified. And that is then where the corresponding adjustments takes place. So the host countries have to be prepared for quite, a comprehensive and complex set of reports. We had a quick discussion yesterday also already, where countries stand with regards to that, because it is the first time they need to submit a BTR, a biannual transparency report. So this is more or less super important for implementing Article 6, but it's also directly related to other reporting requirements under the enhanced transparency framework for progress made against achieving the NDC. What you see then in the lines below, the reporting tables and templates and agreed electronic formats, I think this is all extremely technical content. I don't want to go through that now because I think a lot of fights have been held in the negotiations, for instance, over the agreed electronic format. But again, it's something primarily the reporting entities of the host country governments have to look into, and I think for market practitioner perspective, this may not be so relevant. And then same thing applies to the various submission portals. Although I would point you to this, what you see at the bottom, the Article 6 database under the CARP, the Centralized Accounting and Reporting Platform. That's also where, in this online portal where we can trace all the authorization letters. So that will become an increasingly elaborate database to some extent that has information on all of the documentation provided for ITMO transfers. Next slide. This goes into slightly more detail here now again to what we have discussed already. So I'm not sure if I should spend too much time on it now to make sure we have enough time for discussion. But just it gives me an opportunity to say again that the authorization is the initial step that later on then triggers these various steps on the way to perform corresponding adjustments. So please always keep that in mind. And then we have, the initial report, annual information, regular information. I think we have sufficiently covered that. So I think it's a clearer zoom in kind of way of looking at this, but I think the information is not new. So let's skip it. And next slide, please. This is already my last slide. It's kind of a segue to the next panel discussion. And I did want to visualize this briefly, what we're talking about. This is more or less the infrastructure for performing the corresponding adjustments. And it has various entities that are relevant. I've already mentioned the Article 6 database that is part of the centralized accounting and reporting platform. So we can see in the future any cooperative approach, meaning any market mechanism, the independent crediting programs, the PACM Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, bilateral approaches, all the information will be centrally compiled. And then there should also be, all the primary documents, such as letters of authorization, available with detailed content. This is all very important later on also for then the technical expert review of what countries are reporting on Article 6. So the review is another element that will come into play here. But What is crucial then also for enabling the flow and transfer of ITMOs are the registries. And there is clearly the international registry, which is again compiling information from different types of mechanisms. Then we also have the individual registries of the PACM, of Gold Standard and others that all feed into this Article 6.2 registry. That's why we had a big discussion around interoperability and so on in the negotiations. But this is sort of the hardware in which the actual movements of the ITMOs will flow. And it is the basis then also for these transparency provisions and reporting requirements that I've explained before. With that, I would like to leave you with hopefully a lot of food for thought, and I look forward to the discussions where we can dive deeper into some of those things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. And yes, indeed, it is a segue to the next session. So we have David Haynes from Gold Standard, who will be taking us through what Gold Standard has in terms of registries and also accounting and reporting. And then we'll also have an intervention from Bai, who's the lead reviewer of the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, also sits on the supervisory body of the Article 6.4 mechanism, and is a seasoned expert in all matters Paris Agreement and carbon markets. So I will hand over to you, David, and also Mbai, if you're with us, yeah, you can also say hello. But yeah, over to you, David.
Thanks, Paris. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks for inviting Gold Standard. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm sure all of you, or at least most of you, are familiar with Gold Standard. We are one of the main independent crediting standards that's operating in the carbon market. And this event is great to be at because Gold Standard is the biggest or the most important standard by registered projects in the region in Eastern Africa. So this topic of how do we make Article 6 work, working with our project developers, but also national government, is really important for us. I have been asked to talk about where Stefan basically left off, which is about some of the infrastructure and how the reporting works for Article 6 and corresponding adjustments. And what I wanted to share with you today was how we are currently approaching this at Gold Standard. So we have been through the first round of country reporting, so we have a little bit of experience of how this has worked so far. So I want to share that with you. But also the last slide that Stefan showed also reminds us of the complexity of this topic. And when I was just doing some preparation for this workshop and reminding myself of where the UNFCCC process has got to, I was reminded actually of just how complex it is. And the world that we're headed into in terms of infrastructure and registries is just very different from the world that we're familiar with. So we at Gold Standard are also learning. And we're changing our systems and we're responding to feedback. So certainly, if you have any first-hand experience in this topic, we really welcome your views on it, either in the discussion that we can have today or by getting in touch with us afterwards. So I am going to share my screen. Hope you can see this, okay? I've got five slides, and I'm just looking at the time. I try to get through it in about 10 minutes. So I wanted to cover 4 topics. So the first was just briefly to introduce to you the registry that Gold Standard uses. Some of you, if you're project developers, I saw there are a couple of project developers in the audience today. They'll be well familiar with Gold Standard's registry, but some of you may not be. So I'll just present the basics of that. I want to talk you through how we're currently managing corresponding adjustments and the links with our registry and the information flows between project developers, gold standard and national governments. And then for the last two, I just want to pose some thoughts about how this may evolve in future and how we are seeing this with regards to the stakeholders we interact with. So that's the plan. Okay, for some of you, this will be a familiar picture. This is just a screenshot of the gold standard registry. So the gold standard registry is a proprietary IT system, so it's owned and managed in-house by Gold Standard. And the registry itself is essentially like it's like a bank account for a carbon crediting project. It's where the credits, when they're issued, are held, traded, and retired. But it's also a repository for documentation related to that project. And so you can see here, even from the overview page. So I just filtered this one for Rwanda, for instance. So each line is a separate project. It tells us the status of the project. Here it tells us which sustainable development goals the project contributes towards and which category it's in. And then if you were to click view, you can view all the underlying documentation, issuance of credits, retirements, etc. Most project information is actually just publicly available on the registry. It's only by exception that some information is not disclosed. So, for instance, some information around project finances, but mostly anyone can see any document related to a gold standard project. Anyone can open an account. I mean, if you want to develop an activity, you must open accounts. But we also have buyers who will have their own accounts and traders as well. So there's a fee to open an account and a number of documents you need to submit to us. But otherwise, it's open for people to access. It's at the moment a closed system, and this is relevant to what we're going to talk about and maybe the discussion later. So the way that these information systems have developed to date is with limited or no interoperability. And so for the gold standard registry at present, there is no API which would allow automated data export. And that then poses a challenge in terms of information flowing across systems, which is relevant for Article 6. Yeah, and we're currently in the process internally of assessing the registry and its functionality and seeing how we can improve it in the future. So that's a little bit about our registry. I just wanted to show you, so if we were to click this button view, it would take us to the project page, and then we can look at particular issuances. Sorry, and I just took a screenshot, and so you can see this kind of information. And what we've done for a little while now is we've integrated Article 6 information. So for when the project, a gold standard project, is authorized, we request a whole bunch of information from the project developer, and then we reflect that in the registry. And so this is useful for different stakeholders, for the country government that's doing reporting, for the project developer who's then trying to sell the credits, but also the buyer who may need a particular type of credit. So we have here two fields of information. The first one is telling us whether the corresponding adjustment for this credit has been applied yet or not. And Stefan walked us through how that will happen in terms of the reporting and where the corresponding adjustment takes place. We are keeping an eye on that, and until we see it, you'll see here this field which says not yet applied by the host country. And the second one is that the credits themselves can be authorized under Article 6 for different purposes. So we have COSIA as one purpose, but we have use towards other countries' targets for another one. We ask for this information from the project developer, and then assuming it is confirmed by the host country that authorized the activity, we will reflect it here in the registry. So this is all publicly available. You can filter for this in our registry. You can play around with it yourself, and you can compare between different authorized activities. Okay, so implementing Article 6 is a practical process, and it involves the transfer of information between different actors to make sure we all get what we need out of the system and that there's no double counting. So we at Gold Standard have put in place a process to manage this, and I just wanted to walk you through it so you can see what it looks like. So the first step is for the project developer to request an authorization from the host country where the project is located. And so this is the sort of famous letter of authorization, the LOA, which countries are in the process of developing. We actually have requirements for minimum information that is needed in an LOA for us as the standard. And we have published a model LOA, but that's simply informative to help host governments that are in the process of designing their own. So the project developer needs the LOA, which will then be issued by the host government. And then the host government can report this authorization of the activity or the credits in the UN's infrastructure, IT infrastructure, which Stefan showed. So we have the CART, the centralized accounting and reporting platform. We also have the registry. So the authorization can go there, and that's a sort of official recognition of the authorization. The project developer will then submit a number of different documents to Gold Standard to confirm this authorization, which we will then review for completeness. And assuming that the documentation is complete, we will then label credits in the registry. And that is the screenshot that I just showed you. So that's what it will look like when it's been labeled. Every year, Gold Standard publishes an annual Article 6 report. And this is aimed, it's publicly available, anyone can see it, but it's aimed principally at governments. And it's to help them with their reporting under Article 6. So we produce this in Excel format. The data is extracted from the registry. It gives all the information that the government will need to fulfill their Article 6 reporting requirements for Gold Standard activities that have been authorized. So which activities have been authorized, how many credits have they issued that year, how many have been retired, etc. The government can take that information, it can report it to the UNFCCC, and it applies its corresponding adjustments, which is what's needed to avoid double counting. We at Gold Standard are then looking out for the corresponding adjustments to make sure that they have been applied. Assuming they have been applied, it's all fine, the process works. If not, then we enter into essentially another process to try and rectify the situation. Sorry, hold on. Yeah. So there are different sort of tracks that this could, or different ways it could develop. But in essence, if the corresponding adjustment hasn't been applied for a credit that has been retired, we will enter into a dialogue with the project developer and the host country government to try and get an assurance that corresponding adjustments will be applied at the earliest next opportunity. So when the host country is next reporting. And if it still doesn't happen, so there's still no corresponding adjustment, then as a last resort, Gold Standard can delabel the credits in the registry, so they would no longer be identified as authorized under Article 6. And specifically for CORSIA, a requirement for project developers is that they have, they can have insurance to insure against the risk of this happening. And basically the clauses in that insurance will be triggered for replacement credits. So this is the process of how we're managing it now. And what you'll see is that it's quite manual. So we extract Article 6 data from the impact registry. We format it in Excel. We've only just published the second annual report. So what we're trying to do is to align this as much as possible with the standard reporting formats under the UNFCCC to make it easier for everyone. And so to the greatest extent possible, people can just copy and paste information. And then we email this. Well, we publish it on our website, but it's also emailed to the country focal points to support their reporting. But the end goal is not a manual process. We want to move towards increasingly digital processes. And for that, we have some different options. So the first is that we can use data aggregators. So some of you may be familiar already with the CAD Trust. So this is a World Bank-backed initiative to essentially provide a meta registry, which is pulling data from lots and lots of different registries, aggregating it up into one user interface. And so you can see information from, Gold Standard and Vera and different registries. So all this information is available in one place, and then the host country could then just basically have an account here and use it and use this as a source of information. Another way is that actually we enable direct connectivity to the GS registry via API. So that would allow our registry to talk with another IT system. So it could be another registry or it could be another data platform. And so the data could be extracted automatically. And then there's full interoperability, by which I mean that the credits can flow between registries, which at the moment from where we are, I think is less likely. And then from our side, we want to automate more of the processes, including the checks we run that corresponding adjustments have been applied. So that's hopefully where it's going in the future. And my final slide, just a couple of thoughts, which maybe people will respond to in the Q&A. At the moment, we have a very fragmented system where data is held in all these different IT systems which don't speak to each other and where data transfer is quite complicated between them. There are lots of initiatives that are now active to try and standardize this, but we haven't cracked it yet. We are really working a lot on it, but we're not there. I think from the national perspective, there's a question, which is what level of functionality is actually required from a national registry, and do you need a full registry functionality, by which I mean you can issue and trade and retire credits, or do you need what used to be called just a register, which is essentially just an accounting platform. It can pull information from a registry like Gold Standards. It can display it, say, in a different IT system, a national registry, but the credits will only be traded in the underlying registry of Gold Standard. Is that sufficient? Relatedly, can you just rely on some aggregator instead of building your own national registry? From what we've seen over the last year or so, government reporting to the UNFCCC is really important for us at the moment. And it's important that it's complete and it's important that it's timely, because if it's not, it places Gold Standard, but also the project developers in quite a difficult position. And so we're on a learning curve, like a Gold Standard, but also many governments who are writing these reports for the first time. So we have been in contact and working with several governments to help this. But this is a process that we need to work together on improving, because it's quite important to avoid the risk of delabeling credits. Yeah, and finally, if anyone has any feedback on the processes that we currently have, that is really helpful and very welcomed. But just note that it's not the end goal, which is to have a fully digital process. It's just we don't currently have the systems to enable it, but we are working towards it. So that's it. I spoke for a little bit longer, but I hope that was helpful. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them later. And as I said, you can always drop us a line at help@goldstandard.org, and we like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That was really helpful to also see the progress that Gold Standard is taking in terms of the registry integration and also working with national government. So there's quite a lot to look forward to in the near future. So do we have any questions for David? Otherwise, I will see if Mbaye is with us. Wandorsen, please.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about this. Where is something funny is happening? Okay, thank you very much for the presentations. It's really helpful. I just wanted to ask one question actually two questions. One, I understand, David, that the registry requirement for the voluntary carbon market is for those projects that would require ITMOS, right? Or for every project.
So
Do you
what-
need an yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead, finish, please.
And also your last suggestion about why the transition from physical or manual to digital, and I assume that there is a user interface where users enter data. So why is it difficult, and at what point are you doing manual work? I don't see that point. Data verification, I understand, but yeah, just to those questions. Thank you.
Can I take those? Otherwise, I'll forget these questions as I go along.
Yeah.
Okay. On the very last one, what I mean by manual, sorry, is that we have to extract the data, format it, put it into an Excel, send it via an email. These are just the processes that we currently have. What we would like to get to is that you could have automated data extraction by the system that needs the data, i.e. another IT system. We are not there yet. And it relates, to this question about the difficulties. So firstly, we don't have an API to the registry at the moment. So there is no way of doing automatic data extraction from gold standards registry. That we're working on. And the second, which we're also working on, is just the structure of the data itself. Like, it has to be extracted in a way that can then be understood by the system that is receiving it. And at the because these systems have been developed in isolation, they don't have the same data protocols, or they don't have the same data fields, etc. So this is also something we're working on in essence. So that is what I meant by manual. And just your question on registry requirements, we have a whole bunch of registry requirements for projects generally. What I presented on was just if you have an Article 6 activity, there is some additional stuff. And that was what I showed just now in the slide. But we have a number of different interactions between projects that are generally applicable with the registry.
Great. Thanks for that. Wanda, is that okay with you? Perfect. I would call upon Mbaye if he's in the room. Andrew, could you confirm if he's here with us?
I can't see him in the room yet.
I
We
cannot
do have some
see him
questions, though.
either. I would propose let's take one or two more questions for David, and then I'll try to contact him also actively.
Great, thanks, Stefan. Next we have Jamie, please.
Hi, David, can you hear me? Okay,
I hear
great.
you, yeah.
Thank you so much. When you were showing the screenshot regarding authorization, I should say I'm from a project developer that does mostly clean cooking projects. So we're very interested in corresponding adjustments. When you were showing the authorization rubric in your database, and you said, assuming this is confirmed by the host country, it'll be reflected in the database. And I'm just wondering, in practice, what do you consider to be confirmation? Like how are you actually getting the host government's confirmation that the authorization took place? And then once the corresponding adjustment is made, same question, basically, what is your source of truth? What are you looking for there? So both authorization before corresponding adjustment.
Okay. To answer these questions, in terms of what we have a number of requirements that we need with respect to authorization, including this for what purpose is it being authorized. And that's relevant because, for instance, some credits may be authorized to be used for CORSIA, but not for an NDC. And we need to be able, within the registry, if an airline is using a gold standard credit for CORSIA compliance, to be able to differentiate these. So that's why we need to know. And how it will be confirmed is that in the letter of authorization, which you receive from the government, it should state whether there are any restrictions or for what end purposes the government actually authorizes it. So this should be in the letter of authorization. And then what happens is you submit this to us. I mean, you submit a photocopy of it or whatever. And we have a checklist, which is available on our website that you'll fill out. And that's where you'll write, okay, it is authorized for NDC use or CORSIA, etc. So that's what.
Sorry, just to come in. So I give you a concrete example, but without mentioning a country. So the project developer that I work for has been in negotiation with the host government. They recently delivered an authorization. The host government had asked for us to provide them with wording to the specifications of our organization, which we did, drawing on your template. And then we were issued a letter of authorization that did not reproduce any of the wording we provided, and that was given in terms that the government themselves chose and that would not allow for So how are we going to find out now if there are restrictions? Do we need to go back to them and negotiate an addendum?
It would be, so I suggest, firstly, we probably don't discuss this in this meeting. Like if there's a particular example, then you can just get in touch with us separately. But it would be for the dialogue would be between the project developer and the host country. If there's further information basically that needs to be provided, it would be the project developer who gets it. But maybe if you've got a particular problem, like just drop us a line, or we can have a separate call to talk about it. Only so as not to derail the agenda of our organizers. Yeah. But thank you for your question. Oh, sorry. And the other bit was how do we confirm the corresponding adjustments have taken place? So in two places, so they should be reported annually in digital format by the government. So we've been looking out for those. And the second thing is in the biennial transparency reports that get submitted every 2 years. This is where corresponding adjustments are formally applied. And so our experience so far from the first round of biennial transparency reports, which were due at the end of last year, is they were quite patchy in terms of what information was included, information that probably should have been included that wasn't, including related to Article 6. So that was our initial experience, but that is where we are looking, because that is the official source of, to see when corresponding adjustments have been applied or not. Yeah, so that's where we get it from. Do we go to the next presentation, or should we continue?
I'm not too sure if he's here, but
I have not reached him by Paris, so I would say let's take one more question for David, since there were several, and then we have already covered part of what addresses gold standard in the final Q&A, hopefully. And then we move to the next panel with host country and market perspectives.
Okay. Does Omar, do you want to go? Because I can address the others in writing in the chat.
Yes, thank you, David, for the presentation. Just have one question. You know, the registry is one of the hot items now. The experience of the national government with registry is challenging. I just have a question, because what I see that the available option now is most likely is reporting and accounting registry rather than transaction registry, which means that we need to mirror what's happening in your registry and in their registry to the national government registry. That's fine, but when it comes to corresponding adjustment, how that is going to be reflected in the national registry? In your registry is going to be okay. That's understandable. But how that is going to be reflected while the registry is expected only to do only accounting and reporting. That's one of the maybe a solutions, if it's been provided, is going to be a good step. Interoperability is now almost impossible in the landscape that I have seen so far.
I mean, the application of the corresponding adjustment doesn't, at least as far as I see or consider, it doesn't happen in the registry at all anyway. Like the application of the corresponding adjustment is happening in the reporting and when you get the emissions balances. So the registry is simply tracking the movement and the use of the underlying credits. So what we are doing in Gold Standard is just tracking what is happening. And what can happen, so if you have a national register or this accounting and I forget the term, accounting and transfer platform, basically not a transaction registry. Where we are heading towards should be that that national registry should be able to pull data directly from the gold standard registry. So that could happen like every day or whatever. And so the information will be live and real time. And so they will be able to see if these credits, for instance, have been retired for COSIA, but that will feed into a different process, which will then be the application of the corresponding adjustment. So at least in my mind, I mean, unless there's a different understanding of this in host country governments, they're two different things. And so I think the world in which we can have data exchange between registries, that's still within grasp. Like, it's slow and it's complicated, but it can happen. And that's sort of what I was getting at by interoperability, where we have, I think we can get that. But for the corresponding adjustment, I think that's different. That's a different question. I hope I answered. I hope I answered it. Okay. Yeah.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Next, we have Gabriel, who also raised a question in the chat.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you.
Okay. Please go ahead. Please. Yeah.
I was just going to repeat the question, but I yes, I realize
Okay.
you read it.
No. So I was going to say, what will happen with legacy GS credits that cannot get a corresponding adjustment? They continue to be GS credits. Whether they get a corresponding adjustment or not is so. A couple of issues. Firstly, you cannot have authorized mitigation which happened before 2021. So, I mean, if you've got these credits from before, they're not going to get corresponding adjustments. So we're really talking about post-2021 stuff. So I don't know if that's the period if you're thinking of legacy. But from
yeah, that's the period. I'm thinking, I mean,
from
that is sitting in your registry
Yep.
Already with a gold standard label.
Yep.
However, it will not get a corresponding adjustment.
Yeah, then they continue as GSVERs. Because it's solely at the host country's discretion as to whether to authorize credits or not, and so there'll always be a verified GSVER. It just won't have a corresponding adjustment attached to it.
But then all future credits under the GS will have to have a CA, correct?
No. I mean, most of our credits now. So they at the moment it's this tiny minority, like a infinitesimally small minority, have corresponding adjustment or applications for authorization. So the vast majority are just regular VERs without corresponding adjustments. It will be for the project developer to decide with their activity which route they wish to go down. But it will not be the case that going forward everything will have a corresponding adjustment. No.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, good. I seem to have provoked some discussion.
Yes. We do have one other question. We have 3 minutes until the next session. So I can also read it out. Olivia asks, what steps does Gold Standard take to approve a letter of authorization?
Yeah.
And at which stage does Gold Standard is so far for the approval of the LOA for Cocoa project in Kenya?
Okay, so the latter part I can't answer, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But for the former part, so you need what our requirements are that you need to submit to us the checklist, which I mentioned before. It's available on our website. You can see it's not a very complicated document. It's just for completeness. You need to submit to us the letter of authorization that you have received in whatever form you've got it. You need to submit to us, and this is a new requirement we just updated recently, 2 months ago. You need to submit to us proof that the host country themselves has reported to the UNFCCC on this authorization. And that is just to make sure that the authorization is correct, and that it is confirmed from the host country, because we've had some instances where, for instance, we have not been able to confirm an authorization is actually correct, or it's been issued by one ministry, but another ministry has disputed it, etc. So this is simply a safeguarding measure to make sure that it is a formal authorization by the host country. And then we will check this documentation to make sure that the checklist is complete, that the authorization has been formally done, and if so, then we will label the credits accordingly. So that's the process. I'll put in the chat now where you can see this. We have laid it all out, so you can see it. I'll put in the chat for you afterwards. And for the Cocoa project, I'm afraid I can't say.
Thanks, David. There is one question that has been on the chat for a while now, and then we can take one final question before moving on. So Owen says, thank you, David, for the presentation. You mentioned insurance briefly. Can you share when Gold Standard will publish their guidance on this?
Yeah, so I put in a link about the relevant standard documentations related to authorization below, so check those out. At the moment, basically the current situation is at the moment, we have only approved one insurance provider, which is the World Bank's MIGA Multilateral Insurance Guarantee Authority. But we are we are working on this right now. So stay tuned for announcements from us very soon about expanding the offer of available insurance products. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, you'll hear from us. So at the moment, I linked what's available. Check that out, but look out for us on LinkedIn and on our news, because there'll be new announcements on this soon.
Great. Unfortunately, we'll have to close here, but I see Sultan and Judy, you have your hands up. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you write your question in the chat, I'll answer them as we go through. Yeah.
I hope that's okay for the both of you. So for now, I thank you, David, for your time and for your thoughtful answers. And I hand over to Stefan for the next session. So Stefan, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I believe, David, you will also be around still for the final round of Q&As, right? If there's burning issues. But in addition, of course, to our new panelists. So now I would like to welcome Irene Chegwoti from the Ministry of Water and Environment in Uganda, longstanding DNA member, and also Urban's Benivanira. Urban's, let me begin with you. Are you with us?
He should be. I saw him somewhere.
Yes, me too. Irene, are you with us?
Robbins has been on. Looks like his connection dropped. I'll follow up on him.
Okay, so I think we need to apologize to our audience for a partial appearance of our invited speakers and panelists. I mean, we're having very good discussions so far. But so thank you, Andrew, for keeping working on this. And I would say that now what we want to discuss, I'll quickly frame now this particular session, and then hopefully Urbans and Irene can join us in time to also answer some additional questions. So I think it has also become abundantly clear from mine, but also David's intervention, that host countries really are in the driver's seat. Again, this goes back, at the risk of repeating myself endlessly, that carbon markets are intended to serve the NDC, and that's why governments, host country governments, have a lot of responsibility, especially for the authorizations. And of course, then also the subsequent corresponding adjustments. So we have seen, in my experience now, also in working in almost all of the Eastern African Alliance member states, the push on governments to request letters of authorization is tremendous. At the same time, it's a new thing that has to be done for the first time. Because under Kyoto, you could just have a CDM project or a gold standard project exporting credits, and there was no consequence. The corresponding adjustments are somewhat of a consequence then of transferring a carbon credit abroad. And that's why it's important that countries have the right to either allow or not allow such an international transfer of the carbon credits, because it has an impact on their own goal achievement. And I'm saying that now in slightly a bit more elaboration as originally intended in my moderator role, because I do want to leave you with a sense of what we're trying to discuss with our anticipated panelists. And one thing, there are several complications that lead to uncertainty right now, which is confusing in the market, and where I think we need some better guidance and orientation, or at least a common understanding of what the factors are that are leading to this uncertainty. So number one, NDCs are nationally determined. And there isn't a very clear guidance on how to develop an NDC because it is nationally determined. And so that has led to the situation that we have conditionality of targets, conditional and unconditional targets in the practical NDCs, but we don't have language around that, no rules around that under the Paris Agreement. So that makes it very hard for governments to assess, is this project or the carbon credits that are generated through the project in the conditional or the unconditional scope of the NDC? What does that mean? So I think that's, and I'm saying that also because I've been discussing these things a lot with Irene, for instance. So I feel somewhat confident to now elevate these points here in lieu, of course, of the presence of our panelists. And I think that is one thing where I believe we collectively need to work towards a better understanding of what the conditionality of the NDC targets mean. I think especially at the level of host countries, the accounting methods is something that we urgently need to get more clarity on, because I noted with a lot of interest, David, also in your intervention, that you said the smoothness of your operations depends crucially on the timely execution of the reporting requirements of the host country. So we have seen, of course, in the BTR process already that, there are some delays, and I hope that in the Article 6 reporting process there will not be too much delay, but we also have seen only very few Article 6 initial reports. So it's extremely important that we recognize here the challenges, work towards technical solutions, and then on how to operate them, both for how to deal with the various aspects of NDC features, but then also the intricacies of reporting. I certainly believe that governments actually need a lot more support on these matters. In my experience, countries have now, the global community has invested so far almost more in capacity building for the CDM at the time, following the Nairobi framework. Now countries are dealing with a lot more technical complexity for the Paris Agreement Article 6, but the support is not adequate. So I think it's a great challenge that that we invest time and money into these processes. But then I think it will clear up very quickly, because we are still now in this transition phase where there has been a relatively recent agreement on the Article 6 rulebook. And so countries are now naturally translating these international rules into their national frameworks. And that is another thing we didn't have under Kyoto. I'm coming to an end now because I hear our panelists are getting in. Because we didn't really have much legal or regulatory framework on a national level, at least among many host countries, certainly in the region. So I think this is all really good news. So while a lot of things are unclear, I think it will, become much more transparent and clear in the next 1 or 2 years, I would say, because these things are complicated, take some time. So I hope that the member countries of the Eastern African Alliance, but also other stakeholders, including the market participants, will work together and identify, the challenges, and through stakeholder dialogue, also work towards solutions. I really think it would be crucial for the smooth operation, so that the carbon market can be a useful tool for the region. Good. End of speech. Sorry, I was trying to bridge the time a little bit, frankly, but I do think, and hopefully the points were relevant. I believe that now we should pick up on Mbai's intervention. So Mbai, and for that I would hand over to you back again, Paris, and then we would get to Urbans. Thank you. And thank you both, Mbai and Urbans, for joining us today.
Thanks, Stefan. Mbai, could you confirm that you can hear and your mic is working?
Do you hear me now?
Yeah,
Do you hear
perfect.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. And sorry, I had some problem for the connection. I was asked to talk about the registry from the host country perspective, and I have heard also Stefan talking about the authorization. So I will make my speech in relation to both. First, when it comes to the registry, from the host country perspective, it was very clear that having a national registry or relying to another registry is a requirement to participate in Article 6, because you need to track, you need to authorize and track the international transfer mitigation outcomes. And if you don't have a registry or rely on a registry, you will not be able to track the units. Second, you need also to report on your NDC. And in reporting on your NDC achievement, the transaction under the Article 6 are part of the mitigation activity with a specific treatment, and you have to report back on that also in your enhanced transparency framework, your BTR, biennial transparency report. Based on that, you need to have a registry or rely on a registry. And we took a decision that if a country has not a registry, the Secretariat was mandated to build an international registry and allow those parties that have not a registry or rely on a registry to be able to use the international registry to perform a certain number of reporting requirements. But there were an evolution on that decision because some parties were against when we talk about the structure of this international registry to have all those functions that were already defined to be embedded in the international registry. It's why in Baku, I think it was in Sham, we finally continued the discussion, and in Baku, we decided that for the host country perspective, you have three options. The first option will be to have your own registry or rely on a registry. The second option will be to rely on the UNFCCC registry services. It was requested to the UNFCCC to set up what they call UNFCCC registry services to support the countries that have not registry to perform all the functions. And the third one is to require the Secretariat to support you to develop your registry. They need to have all of that. That are the three options that countries have. And the Secretariat sent a questionnaire to know what option is chosen by different parties. And here, as I said to many colleagues, the invitation and the advice I can give is for countries that have no registry to say they wanted to develop their own registry. For that, they will require the support of the Secretariat at a technical level. But in the meantime, they will use the UNFCCC existing registry services until they have their own. Because the issue is that you can't use another country's registry if you wanted to have different bilateral agreements. If you have a bilateral agreement with Japan, with Switzerland, with Norway, and so on, you can't use one of their registry because you need something that gives you all the information you need in the same place. For that, you can require the Secretariat to use their services, but using all of that. And at the same time, you may have some actors in your country using independent registry like Vera, like Gold Standard, and so on. All of that will happen. And also, you need to take into account whether you will have transactional registry. You want your registry to do some transactions. You also need to take into account that whether you wanted to issue units, because in some bilateral agreement, you will function as a standard. You will adopt methodology, you will register project, you will issue units. And for that, the structure needed to give you all those possibilities. It's why I said when it comes to registry, the country needs to know exactly where they want to go, what type of bilateral agreement they want to have, what standard they want to work with. Do they want to issue units? Do they want to have transactions? Do they want that different actors within the country access to this and that information? Only by knowing all that situation, you will be able to decide whether you can use the UNFCCC registry as it is, you can use another country's registry or an independent registry, you can use this registry that are made accessible online, or you need your personal customized registry performing all those functions. But that work needs to be done to do that assessment. And also, you need with the different actors within your country to know what are their needs also. And also, what are the rules you have in place. And based on all of that, you need also to put on place the regulation as well as the legal requirements that are needed to set up that registry. So that is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to say when it comes to registry. But now when it comes to the authorization, as said by Stefan, we are in the situation to develop our new NDC. When we had our previous NDC, we had not very clear rules when it comes to Article 6. Most of us just said we wanted to use markets to implement our NDC. But now we clearly know all the rules when it comes to Article 6. We need, in developing our NDC, see how we can integrate the carbon market in our NDC, in the conditional one. And for that, there are some preliminary studies we need also to have. For example, having the marginal abatement cost curve to know the different technologies. You need to know the different technologies we wanted to implement in the country. And based on those technologies, to develop the marginal abatement cost curve of those technologies in different sectors in relation with the line ministries. And based on that, we can develop also positive lists and negative lists and gray lists also, because it's not always as clear as it is. There are many of projects that can be in a situation to be addressed case by case. And we need to define the criteria of assessing those projects before the authorization. And lastly, we need to have a very clear and performance tracking tool, because we need, before the authorization is provided, to know what will be the impact in real time of this authorization in the implementation of the NDC. Some partners, technical partners, are developing tools, but we need to adopt a tool that is in line and with the structure of our NDC, and also develop the NDC in a disaggregated manner that allow to have a very clear view when it comes to participate in carbon market and be able to track the market. Thank you, Stefan, and thank you, colleagues. If there are questions, I'm open to any question. I'm here in board at the Met Expert panel meeting.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mbaye. Paris, shall we go directly to Urbans and then take questions later?
Yeah, I think that works.
I think apologies. I ask you to bear with us, Peter, so that we make sure that we cover all inputs, and then we have sufficient time, I think, for an additional round of Q&A where all the panelists will be available. Urbans, are you with us now? Andrew, can you assist, please? Urbans, I see you in the meeting, but we cannot hear you.
Urbans, we can see you saying something, but we can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Very
Yes.
good. All right.
Thank you.
Good. Urbans, nice to see you again in a new role. Very congratulations to that. And I think this allows you to also share, a much broader set of perspectives. And what we would be keen on now to think about, what concerns project developers and also the buyer government perspective. What are the benefits for project developers of seeking corresponding adjustments for their carbon credit activities? We heard David saying, the vast majority currently is not authorized or will be correspondingly adjusted. But in the future, we expect that to change. So what are the benefits from your observation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan, and good afternoon for the call. For the earlier inability to unmute myself. I hope now I'm loud and clear. So back to your question, Stefan, of course, it is no doubt that increasingly appetite for governments to now meet their climate action targets in their NDCs, unlike in the Kyoto Protocol, where it was only the developed world, but everyone now who has signed up to the Paris Agreement has got that obligation. So he's seeking out for measures on how they can meet those targets, which they cannot be able to meet independently or individually. So they seek out for other mechanisms, of course, which now brings us to the question of carbon credits, which when transferred now become ITMOs. But of course, there has been news of greenwashing and therefore reputational risks for both governments and also for project developers and other actors that involved in such kind of projects. So corresponding adjustment has now come into be like a ticket of good practice, if I may use that simple term. So every project developer would now be looking out to how much can they be able to put up that credit out there and then fetch a higher price for those that are yearning to either meet their NDCs, but also in the voluntary carbon market, of course, there are those that have their own individual net zero targets, and they would want to very much buy credits that they feel are authentic, have been generated from very viable sources. So corresponding adjustment comes into salvage that kind of situation. Also, we see an increasing role in environmental, social, and governance practices, whereby corporates are now also becoming so keen to put out their corporate image. So they are seeking out credits which also meet the corresponding adjustment criterion, and therefore project developers wouldn't want to miss that chance. But surprisingly, which is something that still remains unclear on the side of project developers, is the level at which this whole corresponding adjustment is being handled by host parties. Of course, the process is so slow. You understand there are actors who are able to express interest for transition. They have not got some host party approval to that effect, and therefore they are not clear even if they are unable to get the host approval, how about corresponding adjustment? So this now it is up to the governments to really, even if they have not put into place everything that needs to really guide their authorization processes, at least there should be some level of direction to guide project developers at that front.
And Urban, sorry to interrupt, but I want to dive a little bit deeper exactly there where you are right now. So can you elaborate a little bit also from the various activities you're engaged in? What steps are governments taking, potentially together also with UNFCCC and the RCCs, to ensure transparent and consistent authorization and accounting of ITMOs while aligning the carbon credit issuance with national targets, in particular the NDCs?
Yeah, thank you very much. On a country level, for example, most of the countries are putting up their regulatory frameworks. A key example is Kenya, whereby in the course of last month, they published a draft of their carbon registry regulations aimed to guide the process for developing their own registry. We see other countries also trying to continuously engage the project developers, especially who were part of the CDM and now seeking to transition, such that they understand whether their projects are still viable in terms of the additionality, in terms of knowing whether they are still authentic. This is part of the KYC principle that most countries are now being keen about. But also new entrants are also keenly being, revised in terms of conducting due diligence, because we had issues of carbon cowboys and the CDM, and most countries do not want a replica of the same. We saw in 2024, for example, this is in line with the benefit sharing. The Democratic Republic of Congo drafted a carbon benefit sharing plan to ensure that the project benefits trickle down to the multi-layered stakeholders to ensure that there is equitable sharing of benefits. So in line, there is that level of thought process to ensure that not only project developers, take away all the benefits in terms of the revenue, but also the host communities plus other communities also get the benefit. Also in line with the registry, as Mbaye really put it clearly, it's not mandatory that every other country should have a registry, but most countries see it as a level of ensuring autonomy. So those who are not entirely developing new registries, we see scenarios whereby there are countries, Rwanda, which was using the standardized crediting framework, is now being revised to ensure that the interoperability elements really fit into the overall registry that the UNFCCC is going to put in place, having the interim registry right now. But all the work is being geared towards ensuring that all the elements that this registry will encompass will be towards ensuring communication between its registry and the. So I may.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing these practical examples. I think it was becoming very clear that this is work in progress in almost all countries, even the most advanced ones, such as Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda. So we still have some work to do before we have the full picture on how we see the market operate in the future. But as I said before, I think it really also depends on us working all together. First of all, identifying the right questions and potential, gaps, and then also finding the solutions, of course. With that, I would like to hand over to Rita to lead us through the final Q&A and discussion, where all panelists will be available for your questions. Thank you so much. Rita, over to you, please.
Sorry, Stefan, but I can take over the Q&A.
Good.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yes, please go ahead, Paris.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Albans. And I don't know if Irene is with us, but if not, I can open the floor to questions from Mbaye and David, as well as Albans. I think we can kick off the question and answer session with one of the few questions that have been posted on the chat during Mbaye's intervention. So Olivier asks, thank you, Mbaye, for your point of host country having registries to be able to track and authorize ITMOs. If a host country doesn't yet have or unable to develop their own registry, the international registry, you are saying that they can use, is it PACM? Or is there other registries being developed for that purpose? I hope I conveyed the question properly, but also Olivier, please feel free to speak on your question. Mbaye, are you still with us?
So I think I'll take the question on behalf of Mbaye if he's not here. So please stop me if he joins. So what Mbaye was referring to was basically an extension of the so-called international registry. You remember the slide I showed earlier where we have the international registry as the overarching, so to speak, meta registry that links with the mechanism level registries like PACM or Gold Standard, maybe national ones. So it was actually a request of the LDC group that the Secretariat provide that service because there were some concerns, that some countries may not be able to have their registry set up in time. And we've also heard, and I think that was a crucial point that I would like to underline, where David discussed about functionality. Because I think not in all places it will be useful or add a lot of value to have a fully fledged registry with, full issuance and transaction options, because most of the projects take place within the recognized programs anyways, such as Gold Standard or maybe PACM. And so having this tracking and accounting function is actually the most important one, and that can be done with a much leaner version at the national level. And then that can link with, the extension of the international registry. But we don't know yet much about how this looks like. The Secretariat is scheduled to come up with a plan on how to implement that request the parties have approved. But it's definitely not PACM, that we can say.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I missed the question. But just what I can say on the registry, as I said, currently the Secretariat was mandated to develop registry services to allow parties that have no registry to be able to meet all the requirement, all the reporting requirement when it comes to annual report as well as biennial report. And they are working on that, and I think before the end of this year, they will have something that will be available. But that doesn't mean you will, as a country, depending to the structure of your NDC, depending to the type of bilateral agreement you have, and with what country you have that type of bilateral agreement, depending to with the independent standard you are working with, and also the 6.4, depending on all of that, I'm not sure that you will have all the information you need to have a very structured follow-up and tracking of what's going on in your country. And also if you have some domestic regulation in terms of fees, in terms of contribution and all of that, that international registry and the registry services to be provided by the Secretariat can give you the possibility to meet all those needs. Because the mandate the Secretariat has is to meet a certain function, to meet 37, it's very clear in the decision for the reporting. But you may need...
I think we lost by mid-sentence.
Good. I think it was sufficiently elaborate. So let's please move to the next questions, and maybe you can collect 2 or 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question is to Urbans. So Joel says, I would appreciate your update on the status of Uganda's registry. So Urbans, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel, for the question. So Uganda's registry development process is still in the earliest stages because one of the key considerations that the Ugandan government had put as a caveat was to first finalize its carbon market regulations, which were launched 2 months ago. But I understand there is a series of discussions going on between the climate change department and the different development partners, which information is not yet out there in the public domain, but still the process is ongoing. That's what I can say.
Great. Thank you for that precise answer. I think there's a question that I think is directed towards David. Someone, Hunches, asks to add on to Olivia's question, which I believe you already answered, David. Considering the compliance requirements and host country endorsements needed for issuance of a letter of authorization, what are the specific policy, technical, or guidance-related bottlenecks that have contributed to any delay in gold standards letter of approval, authorization, approval for the cocoa project in Kenya? And how do these align with the broader trends observed in similar clean cooking projects under Article 6 frameworks?
Thanks. It's not really possible for me to comment on individual cases. I don't mean to be unhelpful, but it's just that this is sort of a public forum, and this is between an individual project. I should also say I haven't been involved directly in the project that's mentioned in the questions. I can't say definitively, and also I feel it's not the right forum to speak publicly about it. What I can say is that there have been, and this isn't about this specific case, just generally speaking. So we know that getting the authorization can be difficult from the project developers perspective. And then one of our experiences has also been that, and this is largely a learning by doing thing, which is that confirming the LOAs and that they are correct can also take some time, and that's largely a matter of coordination. And we are now entering into processes that we haven't done before. So those are some of the bottlenecks. Getting the authorization is pre-gold standard. That we don't see that. We just understand anecdotally from project developers that it can be quite challenging. So for this particular instance, if there's a specific question, then please get in touch with me directly afterwards, or a member of the team, and we can discuss it around the cocoa project. In terms of similar clean cooking projects, it's almost too early to identify trend, because so gold standard currently has 6 authorized activities. All of them are in the African continent, and off the top of my head, I think maybe 3 are clean cooking. And so it's kind of too early almost to see what a trend will be. But it is the case that there are 6 authorized activities in 6 different countries. And so the circumstances of getting on the authorization differ. And the project developer's experience will differ from one to the next.
Thanks, David. I believe Irene is in the room with us. Maybe we can just have 5 minutes. So Irene, if you can hear us, could you please let us know? Let me see. Okay, I don't think she's with us. Good. So there's another question in the chat from Yamel Laseria. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. So she asks, or they ask, for those countries that have no carbon strategy and a registry so far, how the carbon trading be carried out as per the Article 6 frameworks? Yeah, maybe you want to expand on your question, Tamene? Or, yeah.
So Yamlaxela, I try to answer the question. I think a carbon strategy is not mandatory and the registry is also not mandatory. I think what's mandatory is the accounting and reporting provisions that we outlined as per Article 6(2) and also Article 13 of the framework. You don't need a national registry because you can use the PACM registry, you can use the gold standard registry. What is needed from a government perspective are tools for tracking and accounting of ITMO transfers from countries, from projects in the host country. So that is what we really need. But a strategy and a registry are not absolutely mandatory. Maybe we take one more question or two more questions before we close off, Paris?
Yes, there was a question in the chat from Elizabeth. She asks, Mbaye, does the UNFCCC offer technical support to countries that want to develop their own registries?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, but I have some issue of the with the connection. Yes, because it's part of the decision we had in back. If you want to implement your own registry, you may request the Secretariat to get technical support to develop your own registry. You may have many options. You may have many proposals to do all the work to do this selection, to ensure that the registry at the end of the day you will choose and you will customize meets all the requirements that are needed and also perform all the functions you want to implement in your country. You may request the Secretariat to support you at a technical level to define all of that and do that work. It's why, as I said in the early beginning, the advice I give to country to respond to the question raised by the Secretary, because they received that an email in relation to that, is to say, I want to implement my own registry. But at this point, I don't have it. I will use the registry services of the UNFCCC, but at the same time, I request the Secretariat to support me in developing my own registry. And you will have time to develop your registry to meet all what you want and all the requirements, but at the same time, you can already participate. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Mbaye.
Can I just add one thing?
Of course, please.
It's only in the rush to build a registry. It's worth remembering that there are costs to registries. Like they're not free to build. You have to procure the registry, and they're not always cheap bits of software. You then need the hardware and the server capacity to run the registry, and also you need people, administrators, to do it. And so I'm just saying from past experience, what we've seen. In the 2010s, we see countries who built registries at quite some expense, and it turned out that they just didn't have the project or issuance volume to actually justify running a registry. And so it's a question of we want robust IT systems. We have to be careful when building them to make sure that data can flow between them. But the registries they cost money to run, basically, and you need people who understand them to build them and then to operate them afterwards. So it's not an endeavor to be entered into lightly. And we say that as an organization that runs a registry. So it was just a bit of just a
very important what you say. If you have only 20 projects per year at this point, it's not needed to get your own registry. You can plan to have it later at the beginning using the UNFCCC registry and working on that, developing all the capacity, and also taking time. When you will have 100 projects, you will be able to manage all of that. But at this point, if you have 10 or 11 or 20 projects, it's not needed to get your own registry. And also, if you have very specific bilateral agreement, not working with many other countries, you don't need to have this sophisticated registry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So just rapid fire for all our panelists, 30 seconds. What are your key takeaways on registries, and what should we look forward to? And then we can hand it over to Andrew. So Mbai, since you're the last to speak, your 30 seconds start now.
Yeah, it's what I say. I will invite all colleagues just to respond to the UNFCCC, to their requests, saying they wanted to use the registry services because we push for having that. We are the ones, LDC, SEEDs, and African countries pushing for having that services because we don't have enough projects. We can use these services, but at the same time, starting to work on developing it. And for that, requesting also the Secretariat to support us to do so, and taking our time, not just to go in the proposal we received from many people in setting registry that are not in line with all our strategy, all our situation, taking our time in 1 year, in 2 years to develop our own registry. But at this time, using the UNFCCC registry and requesting them also to support us in selecting the best registry based on our situation. Thank you.
Amazing. David?
I would just say it's complicated. We know it's complicated. There are lots of initiatives which are trying to manage all of these interlinkages. We recognize our role, that we have a role to play, including for our project developers, but also for the host country governments, which we increasingly interact with. So we are improving the registry and actively right now, and we're trying to play our part in a better ecosystem. My message to those who are thinking about getting a registry is please consider these various initiatives. Like, now is the time to build systems with an eye to how they work together and not build a whole bunch more systems in total isolation from one another. So like, we are working with Vera, but also other organizations to try to the extent that we can to standardize data and information. So if you're thinking about registry, like, get in touch, be part of these initiatives, because we're trying to move towards a world of greater harmonization. It's quite complicated.
Great, thank you very much. And I think I can just finally say, according to Heather, she says, grow your registry slowly and carefully. I think that is the best way to end it. So I'll quickly hand it over to Andrew to close us off. And yeah, we thank you once again, our panelists.
Thank you very much. Forgive me, my voice is not that clear at the moment. When we set out to do this training, the key questions that we're looking to answer, what are corresponding adjustments? Should we implement corresponding adjustments? How, of what use are they? And what do I need to implement corresponding adjustments? I would like to appreciate the panelists and the organizers. I would give you a virtual round of applause, but I don't like them because I want to hear. I want to hear rounds of applause. But I thank you so much. The key focus areas that we looked at as we implemented this this training. One, how corresponding adjustments safeguard market activity, their impact on NDC accounting, ITMO authorization, the various forms of reporting that are required, and then also what is this place for private sector and project developer role, and the project developers as well. I think we have, to an extent, built a stronger understanding of how to apply these. We've got practical insights into the systems. We've listened to the experts and the countries who are interested in using corresponding adjustments. And I believe to some extent we are empowered in a stronger way to implement them. I mean, going away from here, I look at it in two ways. On the side of government, what is our strategy going forward? We do need to implement these systems. I mean, corresponding adjustments are literally at the center of Article 6 carbon markets. But then how are we going to implement these systems? Are we going to go ahead, develop our independent registries? Are we going to tag on, join the UN registry, which we lobbied for and which is available for us? As a private sector, are we going to push to implement corresponding adjustments because we see the benefit of Article 6 mechanisms and CORSIA? Or are we going to focus on in-country and then purely voluntary mechanisms, which will also be subjected to corresponding adjustments by some country regulations? Or as another kind of project developer, the new type of project developer who's looking at what can we do with registry systems? How can we integrate them with, with monetary systems? What is a place for blockchain in implementing registry systems? These are questions that will continue to come up, and which in further discussions we hopefully will aim to take on as the market develops. But right now, with thanks from the Eastern African Alliance, the Global Carbon Markets Program, the Perspectives Climate Group, and all our participants, I mean, all our panelists, independent panelists who joined us, Urbans, thank you very much. Urbans has been a long-standing friend of the Alliance and also member. And Alhaji Mbaye, we thank you. David Hines from Gold Standard, thank you very much. Dear Shirima, who joined us yesterday, we appreciate you. Apologies again, some of our panelists were not able to make it, but they sent their regrets, and we will aim to connect further on different subjects. But for now, you may connect with the panelists. You'll receive their email addresses, or with the Eastern African Alliance or with the Global Carbon Markets Program of the GCM, in case there are any questions that are still pending. And I look forward to building the discussion with you. We appreciate your patience and wish you a very good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you all and bye. Thank you all and bye.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We will be sending out a link with a feedback form. Please do fill that out when you see it. Otherwise, have a good evening. I think we will close this off.